Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Let me introduce our group. We are from group 4. We would like to talk about translate paragraph, especially about health. Well, the first one, I will explain about definition of translation. Translation is the replacement of textual material in one language by equivalent textual material in another language. Jadi, terjemahan adalah pergantian isi secara tekstual dalam satu bahasa, atau biasa disebut bahasa sumber. Dengan ini, tekstual ke dalam bahasa lain, biasa disebut bahasa sasaran. Ini menurut Catford 1965, halaman 20.
Well, I'm Sukmawati. I will explain about translation by paragraph. This translation is useful when you want to do school or college assignments that require you to translate a story, article, news, or article that has more than one paragraph. Do not trust Google Translate too much because there will always be translations that are not suitable and wrong. Penerjemahan per paragraf. Penerjemahan ini berguna saat ingin mengerjakan tugas sekolah atau kampus yang mengharuskan kamu menerjemahkan sebuah cerita, artikel, berita, atau tulisan yang memiliki lebih dari satu paragraf. Jangan terlalu mempercayai Google Translate karena akan selalu ada terjemahan yang kurang cocok dan keliru.
Well, the next submaterial is about process of translator. I am Siti Karina and I will explain about it. The first one is about reading. Define key areas while reading. In this case of translation, there are certain key areas that must be clearly defined and before the translation begins. And then comprehension. Comprehension. In order to translate a document correctly, you must first understand the subject matter. Translation is the gleaning of meaning. That is, the translation must first be able to understand and assimilate the information contained in the source text and then reproduce such information within the confines of the target language. Next, start to translation. Have you ever studied to read a long paragraph and given up because it looked too dull? Putting all the information in one place may save space, but it doesn't always make easier translation. Jadi, apakah kalian pernah membaca paragraf yang paling panjang dan menyerah untuk menerjemahkannya karena terlihat membosankan? Nah, menempatkan semua informasi di suatu tempat dapat menghemat ruang, tetapi itu tidak selalu membuat terjemah lebih mudah. Memecah paragraf menjadi beberapa bagian penting untuk memulai terjemahan yang baik. Selama proses penerjemahan, seorang penerjemah berusaha untuk membangun kesetaraan serta teks sumber dan bahasa target. And then, evaluation and revision. Evaluation and revision, you need to evaluate the quality of translation once the translation is completed. Check whether it conforms to the requirements that you set for it. And the last is about judgment. The judgment can only be achieved by native speaker of the target language who also have a very good thorough command of the source language. You will find it possible to convey every nuance of the source text if you have not fully mastered the source language.
I'm Fitriani. I will explain about steps for a good translation of help. There are 5. The first, keep the translation simple. The second, make sure the translation is 100% accurate. The third, maintain correct medical terminology. The fourth, use an experienced healthcare industry translator. The fifth, don't rely on machine translation for translation of technical health text. Suryawinata 2003 states that the principles of scientific text follow a narrative, descriptive, expository, or argumentative way of presenting. This is different from literary texts, which rarely move on various kinds of expression that contain inaccuracies, metaphors, poetry, and etc. Suryawinata pada tahun 2003 menyatakan bahwa prinsip teks ilmiah mengikuti cara penyajian yang naratif, deskriptif, ekspositoris atau argumentatif, dan hal ini berbeda dengan teks sastra yang lebih mengandalkan berbagai macam ungkapan yang mengandung ketaksaan, metafora, puitisasi, dan lain sebagainya.
Well, I'm Adzra Atifah Azhar and I will explain about technique of translation. Technique are the result of the choice made by the translator. Teknik penerjemahan merupakan hasil dari pilihan yang dibuat oleh penerjemah. The first technique is adaptation. Adaptation is a translation technique replace to search language culture elements with culture elements that have the same properties in the target language, and the culture elements familiar to the target audience. The second technique is amplification. Amplification is a translation technique that shows or paraphrase the information implicit in the search language. For example, the word Ramadan is paraphrased to be Muslim fasting month, atau kata Ramadan ini diparafrase menjadi bulan puasa umat muslim. And the third technique is borrowing. Borrowing is a technique of borrowing words or expression from the search language. For example, pure borrowing is harddisk, which translates to hard disk, and naturalized borrowing is a computer, which translates into computer. And the next technique is calque. Calque is a technique of translating search language phrases literally. Example, General Secretariat yang ditranslate menjadi Sekretariat Jenderal. Nah, and the next technique is compensation. Compensation is a technique of introducing information elements or the influence of the search language text style in the target language text. And the next technique is description. Description is a translation technique that is applied by replacing a term or expression with a description of its form and function. For example, the Italian word panettone translates to traditional Italian cake eaten at New Year, atau kue tradisional Italia yang dimakan pada saat tahun baru.
I'm Nur Amalia Ilham, and the next technique is discusser creative. This technique is intended to display temporary equivalent that are unexplained or out the context. Example, the title of the book Si Maling Kundang is translated as a Briar Sun Maling Kundang. And next, establish equivalent is a technique for using familiar terms or expression. This technique is similar to literary translation. Example of the word effective and efficient are more commonly used than the words kill and mankus. And the next, generalization. Realization of the technique is to ask terms that are more general and more natural. For example, is translation as place to fly, and rickshaw is translation as vehicle. Realisasi dari teknik ini adalah dengan menggunakan istilah yang lebih umum atau lebih netral. C. Application of linguistic. Embodiment of this technique is to add elements in the text linguistic BSA. This technique is commonly applied in consecutive translation or in dubbing. And next, linguistic compression. Linguistic compression is a translation technique that can be applied by translator in simultaneous translation on in translating film text by synthesizing linguistic elements in the BSA text.
My name is Ismayani. I will explain about literal translation. Literal translation is a technique of translating experience word for word. For example, the sentence I will ring you translates to I will call you. Okay, the next material, modulation. Modulation is a technique of changing the point of view, focus, or cognitive category in relation to a source language or text. Okay, the next, particulation. Realization of this technique is to use more concrete or precise term. Example, air transportation is translated as helicopter, superordinate to subordinate. This technique is the opposite of the general techniques. The next material, reduction. This technique is the opposite of the amplification technique. So language text information in condensed in Bahasa target. Example of the month of testing in translate as Ramadan. This technique is similar to the technique omission or deletion or subtraction or implication. Okay, next, substitution. Substitution refers to change linguistic and paralinguistic element or intonation or sign. Same language in Arabic, which is to place your hand on your chest, and translate as thank you. The last material is variation. Realization of this technique is to change the linguistic or paralinguistic element that affect the linguistic variation of change in textual tone, style of language, social dialect, geography dialect. This technique is commonly applied in translating drama script.
Well everyone, that's all of our explanation about translation paragraph. Thanks for watching. The last I say, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.